I was just thinking, oh my goodness. You know, over the past few weeks, Peter's been teaching a lot on false teachers. And you know, this is the last letter that Peter wrote before he was killed. And for him to take a whole chapter, 22 verses, and to teach us about false teachers, that should show us the importance. Now, teaching on false teachers is not a subject that you plan to preach. It isn't a subject that you want to preach on. But when you do expository type preaching where you take it verse by verse and chapter by chapter, book by book, when the topic comes up, that's what you preach. And so over the past few weeks, Peter has been warning us and giving us signs to look for and things to watch out for when we experience these false teachers. You know, I think the most frustrating thing for a pastor is when you discuss a topic like this, when you express the importance of the topic that's being taught from the pulpit. You even go into the details, and there's been times that we've spoken of and discussed about some of the modern day prophets, the modern day false teachers that we deal with today. And you talk about that and you discuss that and you expose some of their false teachings. You expose some of their blasphemous lessons that some of the blasphemous things that they say. And then some people say, oh, I like to watch them. I really like to watch them. They're one of my favorites. And Peter says we have got to be careful when dealing with false teachers. When we're dealing, he took a whole chapter, the last part of his book, the last part of his letters, to warn the church that there are those wolves out there that are coming in to destroy the body of Christ. And Peter has given us several outward signs to reveal an inward problem. You see, these false teachers are greedy. One of the first things that he pointed out to us is the greed of the false teachers. Last week we looked at the top money makers for the teachers, the religious leaders in the world. The lowest of the group, number 10, was worth $8 million. And the wealthiest of the group, number 1, was worth $760 million. Peter told us that they are darers of God, not afraid to blaspheme angelic majestics. They respond only to pleasure and to greed stimuli. They're daytime carousers. They're not afraid to do in the daylight what most people do at night. And then Peter said that they are sensual. They are sexual. You know, over the years, we've seen many of these types of false teachers and prophets who Peter calls soil spots and scabs. We've seen them defame the face of Christianity. Ted Haggard, an evangelical pastor, Ted Haggard ranted against the evils of premarital sex, adultery, and gay marriage. That was until he was caught in a gay sex scandal in 2006. A male escort named Mike Jones publicly claimed that Haggard had been a client for years. Not only that, Haggard had allegedly used crystal meth in front of his male lover. Ted Haggard was forced to resign from his church following his downfall. He attempted a form of conversion therapy and embraced his heterosexual side, and his wife stood by haggard during all of the scandal. We all remember Jim Bakker. Jim Bakker was perhaps the most popular televangelist in the 1980s, though his wife Tammy Faye gave him a run for his money. But that all ended when Bakker was brought down by an enormous scandal that included sexual abuse and fraud. In 1987, Bakker's secretary publicly accused the televangelist of raping and drugging her. After Bakker resigned from his ministry, he was charged with accounting fraud and sentenced to 45 years in prison. Bakker was replaced by Jerry Falwell, who called his predecessor the greatest scab and cancer on the face of Christianity in 2,000 years of the church's history. I noticed Jim Bakker's back on TV, selling end-time food. For $2,500, you can buy 22 5-gallon buckets of rice and cheese. Bill Gothard. Bill Gothard is famous for his homeschooling ministry, known as Gothard Institute of Basic Life Principles. He promoted extreme submission of women and ordered them to dress modestly. Gothard was also close with the Duggar family and a number of Republican politicians. In 2014, more than 30 women accused Gothard of molestation and assault, including underage girls. The allegations included sexual harassment, inappropriate touching, molestation, and rape. Gothard was forced to resign from his ministry, though he resurfaced on the internet with a blog in 2016. Shakoa Asara. In 1984, he preached an end to marriage and sexual relations, but it later came out that Asara was having sex with many of his female followers, and this is quite disgusting, and collecting glass bottles filled with their pubic hairs. Tony Alamo. Tony Alamo rocketed to fame in the 1970s for preaching a fundamentalist interpretation of Christianity. When his wife died in 1982, Alamo went a little crazy. He displayed her embalmed body for months and claimed that she would rise from the dead. And it only got worse from there. In 2009, Alamo was sentenced to 175 years in prison. The charges included sexual abuse, transporting underage girls across state lines for sexual purposes, pedophilia, marrying an 8-year-old girl, and child rape. Alamo's defense: he was framed by the Vatican. Bob Coy. Bob Coy was most famous evangelical pastor in Florida. His Fort Lauderdale megachurch had 25,000 members, and George W. Bush even visited Coy. But it all came crashing down in 2014 when he admitted to multiple affairs and a pornography addiction. He resigned in disgrace, but the worst was still to come. In 2017, Coy was publicly accused of molesting a 4-year-old child. Police sat on the accusation for months and dropped the inquiry without interviewing Coy. The case is still ongoing. Dave Reynolds. He was a pastor at Cornerstone Bible Fellowship Church in Sherwood, Arkansas, until he was caught looking at child pornography. Reynolds was 40 years old when the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children found evidence that someone in Sherwood was visiting child pornography websites. The culprit was none other than Pastor Reynolds. In 2016, Reynolds was charged with 70 counts of possessing or viewing child pornography, which is a felony charge. Doug Phillips was the president of an extreme Christian group called Visit Forum Ministries. He was a close friend with the Duggars and Kirk Cameron, and an advocate of the Tea Party conservative political movements. Phillips argued that women must be completely submissive to their husbands and fathers. Daughters should not even have a say in who they marry, according to Phillips, and women should have as many children as possible. In 2013, Phillips was forced to resign after being publicly accused of sexual abuse and assault against a woman that he met when she was only 15 years old. Several years later, Phillips had moved the woman into his house as his nanny. Phillips sexually abused her by self-pleasing himself as the woman cried and asked him to stop. And we all remember Jimmy Swaggart, a Pentecostal televangelist, got his start on television in 1975. In the 80s, he teamed up with Reverend Jerry Falwell, Reverend James Robison, and Reverend Pat Robertson to use the Christian right to shape the Republican Party. Satan's agents are everywhere, according to Swaggart, and include feminists, Democrats, and rock musicians. Swaggart's fall from grace happened in 1988 when it came public that he was cheating on his wife with a New Orleans prostitute. Not only that, Swaggart was an avid consumer of porn and experimented with BDSM. I had to look that one up too. I'll not tell you what it is. All the while condemning such immoral acts. And I'll tell you one more, and we'll stop with this one. I had several. Michael Hentz was a youth counselor at the First Assembly of God Church in Des Moines, Iowa. During the 2004 presidential election, he supported Joe. These guys must be anti-Republican. I didn't notice that when I took this. Telling voters that he would fight against abortion and porn. But that same year, Hentz was fired for having sex with a minor. Hentz was 35, married, and had 4 kids, became sexually involved with a 17-year-old girl whom he had been counseling. Clearly, the Reverend was not cut out for being a youth counselor. He got off with no jail time, and 10 years after he was convicted, his name was removed from the sex offender list. 2 Peter chapter 2. And I'm going to read 10 through 22 just so we keep everything in context, but we'll pick up with verse 14 in our study this morning. But chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despise government, presumptuous are they, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignities. Whereas angels which are great in power and might bring not railing accusations against them before the Lord. But these, as a natural brute beast made to be taken and destroyed, they speak evil of the things that they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption, and shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, as they that count it pleasure to riot in the daytime. Spots are they, blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you, having eyes full of adultery, and that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls, and heart they have exercised with covetous practices. They are cursed children, which have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam the son of Besor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumb ass, speaking with man's voice, forbade the madness of the prophet. There are wells without water, clouds that are carried with a tempest, and to whom the mist darkness is reserved forever. For when they speak great swelling words of vanity and allure, though the lusts of the flesh, through much wantonness, those that were clean escape from them who live in error. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are the servants of corruption. For of whom a man is overcome, of the same is he brought in bondage. For if after they have escaped the pollutions of the world, through the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled therein and overcome, the latter end is worse to them than the beginning. For it had been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than after they have known it to turn from the holy commandments and to deliver unto them. But it has happened unto them according to the true proverb, the dog is turned to his own vomit again, and the sow that was washed to her wallowing in the mire. Having eyes full of adultery. You see, what Peter is telling us here is that these false prophets, these false teachers, they have no ability to use self-control. These false teachers have gone so far that they aren't able to look at any female, regardless of age, from age 4 to age 84, regardless of outward appearance. They are unable to look at any female without looking at them as an object of adultery or sexual pleasure. They are unable to. That's what it means that they have eyes for adultery. They look at every single female as a potential pleasure for them. No female is off limits. Or, as we saw in this list, sometimes no male, if that is his sexual desire, is off limits. And the same goes for female false teachers. No male is off limits, or I suppose no female if that's her perversion. You see, the next part of verse 14 says that they can't help it. They can't help it. They don't have that control within them. They are slaves to that type of sexual sin. Every woman that they look at all day long becomes a sexual fantasy for them. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 28 says, "But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart." You see, you need to understand the depth of this grotesque perversion that they're dealing with. He has had sexual fantasies with every single female in his congregation. From the 4-year-old in children's church to the grandma sitting in the front row, he has had sexual, perverse thoughts and fantasies about them. Remember last week when Peter taught us that they were like savage beasts? Then they only respond to pleasurable stimuli. You see, he was teaching us that they're like a nasty dog who will mount any dog who will slow down long enough. Or he'll mount your leg if you slow down long enough. Or he'll mount the cat. Or he'll mount the pillow. Why? Why does a dog do that? Because they respond to the instinct to feel that pleasure. They can't help it. That's just what they do. That's their nature. He says, and then to make things worse, they are beguiling or enticing unstable souls. Too often it goes farther than fantasies. How many women have been taken advantage of behind closed doors in the name of counseling? Taken advantage of the spiritually weak. Those that come in with heartaches, those that come in with problems, those that come in are looking for help and taken advantage of because of these false teachers, these perverts. Now the word translating beguile here, it means to catch with bait. You see, they're like a skillful fisherman. He tries one bait, and if she's not biting that bait, he'll try something else. He has a whole tackle box full of bait that he can try until that female takes a hold of the bait. And just like a fisherman, he's patient. He's patient. He'll keep fishing, and he'll keep fishing. As long as he knows there's a fish he can catch, he'll keep fishing. Peter said that his heart is trained. You see, this word that is translated trained here, we get the word gymnasium out of it. It means to exercise or discipline. He has exercised and disciplined his heart for this very thing. William Barclay put it this way: the picture is a terrible one. The word which used for trained is the word which is used for an athlete exercising and training himself for the games. These people have actually trained and equipped and taught their minds and hearts to concentrate on nothing but the forbidden desire. They have deliberately fought with the conscience until they have destroyed it. They have deliberately wrestled with God until they have thrown God out of life. They have deliberately struggled with their finer feeling until they have strangled them. They have deliberately trained themselves to concentrate on the forbidden things. Their lives had been dreadful battle to destroy the virtue and to train themselves in the techniques of sin. Listen, this isn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a momentary lapse of judgment. This was premeditated, well thought out, skillful, and then put into practice. But Peter says that they are a cursed children. You see, Peter is actually using a Hebraism here that carries the idea that we are the children of whatever influences most dominate our lives. We are children of the things that dominate our lives. Their father is Satan. They are liars and they are hypocrites. They are everything that God has cursed. Look at verse 15 and 16 again. Which have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Besor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. But he was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumb ass, speaking with man's voice, forbade the madness of the prophet. Followed the way of Balaam. Balaam was a prime example of a prophet that is motivated by greed. King Balak had sent for Balaam. He sent for Balaam because he wanted Balaam to come and to curse Israel. He was afraid of Israel because of her size. He had heard some things that had happened in the past, and he wanted Balaam to come and to curse Israel. Now, Balaam obviously had a reputation for being a prophet for hire. But I do want to point out, Balaam was a Gentile prophet. God had given him this gift of prophecy, this ability to speak. And so Balak had sent these men to Balaam. And he said, listen, we told him exactly we want you to come. Balak wants you to come. He needs you to come and to curse the children of Israel. Balaam says, hold on. Let me go talk to God. Let me find out what God says about this. I'll come back and I'll let you know what's going on. God said, absolutely not. Do not go with these men. Do not take their bribes. Do not take their money. Do not go. Balaam went back, He said, listen, God says no, there's nothing I can do. They go back to Balak. Balak says, I want you to go back. This time, I want you to take more important men. I want you to take more men. Take him more money. You tell him whatever he wants. If he will come and he will curse Israel, I will give him whatever he wants. They go back to Balaam. Hey, Balaam, listen. Balak says, if you'll come curse the people, I will give you anything you want. I will make you more important. I will give you all the money you want. Balak said, hey, listen, I done told you God says no. I can't do anything unless God lets me do it. But let me ask him, just in case. Let me go ask him. And so he goes back. You see, this is an example of God's permissive will. I've already told you no. Why are you back? I already told you absolutely not. Why are you here in front of me asking now? Go. If these men are still here, then go. You go with them. But you only speak what I tell you to speak. Numbers 22:22 says this was a test. God was testing Balaam. Verse 22 says God was angry because he was going. God told him to go. God said, okay, if that's what you do, you want to do, then you go ahead and do it. But God was angry because he knew Balaam's heart. He knew the only reason he was going was for the money. He had full intentions of going and doing exactly what he needed to do to receive the money that Balak had offered. Listen, it's like this, gentlemen. Listen to me. When you ask your wife if you can go fishing, your friends have asked you to go fishing with them, and you go to your wife and you say, honey, would it be all right if I go fishing with the fellas this weekend? And she says, but it's my birthday. I thought we were going to go out. I thought we were going to have dinner together. He says, oh, come on, honey, we can do that anytime. She says, no, it's my birthday. We're going to spend the day together. And you keep hounding her, and you keep whining around and crying around, and she finally says, fine. Do whatever you feel is right. Do not do it. It's a trap. She is testing you. Do not go. Fine does not mean fine. Fine means you are going to have hell to pay, is what fine means. Don't do it. God told Balaam no. And then he said, fine. Do whatever you think is right. And man, Balaam packed his bags, threw him on his donkey, and man, out the door he goes. And God was angry. Listen, when God says no, and you know he says no, stop asking. Don't ask again. Don't push God to his permissive will. You won't like the outcome. So Balaam couldn't stop thinking about all the money that he was going to get. He couldn't stop thinking about this great wealth. Man, he's just thinking that he's already spent the money. Man, he's riding his donkey down through there. He's thinking about the prestige and the honor. And God seen his heart. God knew what he was thinking. God knew what his plans were. And so the angel of the Lord came and met him. Well, the donkey's coming down through there and looks up, and there's the angel of the Lord with his sword drawn. And the donkey said, whoa, I'm going this way. So he turns and goes into the field. Balaam's like, what's the matter with you, you stupid donkey? Get back out on the trail. What's wrong with you? They go down a little bit farther. The angel of the Lord had moved over. Once again, the donkey sees the angel of the Lord. Man, he starts going over sideways trying to get away from the angel of the Lord. The donkey runs up against the wall, smashes Balaam's foot. Balaam's like, "You stupid donkey," begins to beat the donkey again. Finally, a third time, they're going down through there, and the angel of the Lord came to a spot into a narrow path. The donkey couldn't go left, the donkey couldn't go right, so he just sat down. I ain't going forward. Balaam jumped off, grabbed a stick, and began to beat the donkey. The donkey says, whoa, wait a minute. Balaam, why are you beating me? Mr. Ed, that was terrible. This is the Old Testament version of Mr. Ed. He said, "Balaam, why are you beating me? Why have you beat me these 3 times? What did I do to deserve a beating?" He said, "You stupid donkey." He said, "You made me look like a fool. Every time I'm trying to go straight, you keep going left, you keep going right, and now you sit down." He said, "You've made me look like an idiot before these guys." And she says this. She says, "Haven't I been your donkey your whole life? Haven't you ridden on me since I was just a colt? Have I ever done this before?" "No. You were a good donkey." "Then don't you think maybe something's wrong?" And about that time, Balaam's eyes were open and he could see the angel of the Lord standing with the sword drawn. He said, "It's true." He said, "You beat your donkey 3 times, and if it hadn't been for your donkey, I would have killed you long ago." Balaam said, "Do you want me to go back?" He said, "No, keep going. You're on the path, keep going. But I'm telling you, don't you say a word that I don't tell you to say." "Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord." And so he meets up with Balak. Balaam says, "Listen, this is what we're going to do." Balak takes him up on the mountain. He says, "Listen, this is what we're going to do. I want you to build me 7 altars. Bring me 7 rams and 7 bulls." So Balaam and Balak offered the 7 rams and the 7 bulls. And he says, "Now I'm going to go speak to the Lord. I'll be back." He goes back. He speaks to the Lord. He comes back. He walks up. He begins to speak over Israel. And what came out but blessings. He began to bless Israel, to pronounce blessings upon them. He gets done, and Balak said, "What is wrong with you? I called you here to curse them, and you speak blessings over them." Balaam says, "Hold on just a minute. You don't understand something. I can't go against what God puts in my mouth. When I opened my mouth, this is what came out. The blessings came out. I couldn't stop it." Balak says, "Tell you what, let's move to a different spot. Let's try this again. 7 more altars, 7 more rams, 7 more bulls. Let me go talk to God." He goes back, he speaks to God. He comes back, steps up, he begins to speak. Once again, blessings become out of his mouth. Listen to this. This is Numbers chapter 23, verse 19 through 24. "God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I have received a command to bless. When he has blessed, then I cannot revoke it. He has not observed the misfortune of Jacob. Has he not observed the misfortune of Jacob? Nor has he seen trouble in Israel. The Lord is God with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt. He is for them like the horns of a wild ox. For there is no omen against Jacob, nor there any divination against Israel. At the proper time it shall be said to Jacob and to Israel that God has done what God has done. Behold, a people rises like a lioness, And as a lion, it lifts itself. It will not lie down until it devours the prey and drinks the blood of the slain. Balak says, what is wrong with you? I am paying you to curse Israel, and here you are. Every time you open your mouth, you bless them. He says, let's try it one more time. One more time. We'll do it one more time. I'm going to try just one more time. Balaam, I'm going to give you one more chance. He takes him to another spot. 7 more altars, 7 more rams, 7 more bulls. He says, I'll be right back. He goes back. He prays with God. He speaks to God. He comes back. He opens his mouth and begins to bless Israel once again. Balaam says, I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. Balak says, stop talking. Just stop opening your mouth. I don't want you to curse them. I don't want you to bless them. Stop talking. The best thing for you to do is to get out of here. Leave. Leave now. I want you out of my presence. I want you gone. And Balaam starts seeing the money going away. All of the dreams that he had, all of the things he was going to buy, the big screen TVs and the Porsches, everything he was going to buy is gone now. He says, whoa, wait a minute. Stop, right there. He says, I can't curse Israel, but they can curse themselves. And if you'll give me another chance, if you'll meet with me, I will tell you how to cause them to bring a curse upon themselves. Balak says, I'm listening. He said, listen, this is what you do. I want you to find all the prettiest girls you got in the camp. Find all the pretty girls, all the pretty women that you have, the prettiest ones. I want you to put makeup on them. I want you to put them in their pretty dresses, their mini skirts. I want you to put makeup on them. I want you to put the perfume on them. And I want you to send them down and let them seduce the men of Israel. Once they have seduced the men of Israel, this is what they're going to do. They're going to have them to start worshiping Baal. And when they do that, then God will curse them. Balak says, what a great idea. What a great idea. Let them curse themselves. And so that's exactly what they did. They sent the women in. The men began to intermingle, to intermarry, to have relations with these women, and the women began to cause them and to lead them into worship of Baal, and God became angry. He became very angry with Israel. He called Moses in and he told him, I want you to execute all the leaders. You're going to execute every leader in Israel, and you're going to execute any man who has become involved with Baal. Every single one of them. And they're all standing there, and they're weeping, and they're crying before the tent, and they're just crying out, and they look up, and here comes a man with a Midianite woman. And they go into the tent. Phinehas stands up. He looks around. He walks over and he grabs a spear. He walks into the tent with the man on top of the woman, and he thrust a spear through both of them. Killed them both where they lay. But because of this, because of the false teachings, because of what Balaam did, 24,000 Israelites died because of his false teachings. Listen, God takes serious those who cause others to follow a false gospel. This is not a joke. It doesn't matter what they sound like. It doesn't matter how good they preach. We're more worried about how well they speak than about the content of what they're teaching. I'm telling you, be careful about what you're listening to. Now, I'm not saying, and I said this last time, I'm not talking about being afraid that every person that's teaching or preaching, don't go in with a suspicious mind. But there's a reason we study the Word of God. There's a reason that we learn the things out of the Bible so that when a false teacher comes, it throws up flags. When they teach government workers to recognize false money, counterfeit money, they don't show them the counterfeit money. They only show them the real money. And they learn every nook and every cranny and every line and everything upon that bill. And then when a false bill comes or when a counterfeit comes, they recognize it right away because something's wrong. We don't need to go out and learn about all of these false religions. We don't need to go out and learn all of these false things. We don't need to read the Book of Mormons. We don't need to go out and read all of these different books. We need to get our nose into this, and we need to study this, and we need to learn this, and we need to understand what this says. So when a false prophet says something that is blasphemous, a flag comes up and we know that they're from the devil. But Peter says, listen, we have these signs. There are things you can look for. There are things you can see. I'm not saying that every wealthy preacher is a false teacher. What I'm saying is that's one of the signs. I'm not saying that every preacher who made a mistake and had sexual relations with somebody that wasn't their wife is a false preacher. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying those are signs. Those are things to look for. Those are things to watch. If they get up and they begin to speak irreverently of the demonic things, of Satan, of demons. Even the angels didn't do that. Michael didn't do that. He said, the Lord curse you. He didn't even blaspheme them. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to the words that are coming out of their mouth. This is not a game. Listen, as your pastor, as your shepherd, as I stand up here and I'm responsible for your spiritual well-being, I'm telling you, be careful out there. I can't follow you to your houses. I can't watch what you're watching and look what you're looking at on the internet. But be careful. Peter has given us the signs to look for. And hopefully, we've only got one more week of this. But I looked at how many verses are left. We may have two. But we're going to get through it. Because I'm telling you, this is important enough for Peter to put it in his last letter. But can I tell you something? Balaam didn't get away with anything. Listen to this. Numbers 31:8. They killed the kings of Midian along with the rest of their slain. Evi and Rechem and Zur and Hur and Reba and the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, and they killed him with a sword. You see, just as these false prophets will pay a high price, that high price will be their very souls. Today we added to the list that Peter had given us uncontrolled sexual lust. And next week he's going to give us some more things to look at. Would you please stand to your feet? Listen to me, it's not okay. It's not by accident that they say the things that they say. It's not by accident that every message you listen to, they're asking you for money. There's a reason that number one on the list is worth $760 million. There's a reason. Don't get me wrong, I listen to a lot of preachers on the radio, a lot of them. Every day, that's all I do. I listen to preachers all day long. I'm a gospel addict. I love to hear preaching. But I can tell you now, those that I listen to rarely ask for money. Rarely ask for money. And when they do, it's usually just a reminder we are supported by our listeners. And that's what they say. But when they start telling you, if you give this, you'll get this. If you give $50, you'll bring out $5,000. If you send $100, you'll get a new home. If you send $1,000, God's going to heal your cancer. When they start saying things like that, you better watch out. You better watch out. Father, thank you for this word. God, you put the importance on this topic. God, you put the word in your book. God, I'm just a messenger. And I know, Father, as for me, as I have done this study, as I have gotten deep into the letter of Peter, I know as I look around, God, I see some revelations. I see some things that, Father, I missed before. And God, I thank you. I thank you. I thank you, God, for making it clear to us. And now, Father, I pray for your sheep. God, I pray that their eyes are opened. God, if they're listening to these men or these women that speak fallacies, that speak blasphemous things against you, Father, I pray you reveal it to them. I pray, God, that they are willing to turn the channel, to change what they watch. God, make it clear to them. Because there is a hell to pay when the gospel is distorted and enable for them to receive these sexual favors, to receive money, to receive this pleasure that they find in deceiving your people. And now, Father, as we conclude this service, God, I pray you pour your blessings out. God, what a wonderful day we've had. What a wonderful service we've had. I pray we all walk out of here, God, with our heads high. For you are still God and you are still good. And we ask all these things in Jesus' very precious name. Amen. God bless you. Go enjoy the sunshine.